Everybody. I'm very happy to see some audience in the pavilion. We know that nobody comes only for this discussion, but we hope that the discussion will add to the experience you have of the exhibition we have designed so far. The series of discussions we are having here has been designed by the editors of an important Italian magazine on architecture and architectural theory, Rocco, and I'm very proud that Andrea Zanderigo, who was our first contact from Rocco and with whom we defined the whole program, is here today to chair the session, and I hand over to him to give an introduction to the panel, and I hope that we have a very interesting 1 hour of discussion.
Hello everybody. Thank you so much, Christian, for introducing me. When Harald and Christian, so the two curators of the pavilion, asked Rocco to imagine something to happen here in the pavilion, in a way they talked us about this idea, this former connection in between Venice and Vienna, at the times. We are talking about the times of the big empire, and not only that, obviously, because that was a sort of connection we produced, even a lot of shared culture and shared knowledge. And so we proposed a very simple format, in a way, which we called political dialogues, in which we imagine each time to invite a politician, supposedly a politician with a sort of experience in multiculturalism or in multilingual environments, and maybe only because, I don't know, taking part in the European Parliament, this sort of Tower of Babel we got in Brussels. And each time to couple a politician with either an artist or an architect, again, with a sort of knowledge about this hybrid milieu. And so these political dialogues, we imagine them to be in chapters. We are now, I guess, in the third edition, which is Languages of Politics. We had architectures of dialogue, we had places of dialogues, and we will have spaces of dialogues, I guess in October. We still have to decide exactly when. From our point of view, it's even an attempt to, let me say, after decades of isolation, from the point of view of intellectuals or architects, simply in a way minding their own job and trying to have a relationship with politicians only in order to get some more job. It's even an attempt to finally start discussing, thinking about a possible European project, even from the point of view of architecture. And yeah, I would say that's almost all, and I would say that this is the perfect place in which to host such a discussion, because the magnificent array of world parliaments here, in all their objectivity, obviously might arise a lot of hidden narratives, a lot of hidden interpretations about the relationship between architecture and politics. So today we got Maria Vassilakou, which is the vice mayor of Vienna, and yeah, I think she will even maybe talk about her own personal story, which I think it might be interesting here, not only in, let me say, political terms. And we got Armin Linke, which is a well-known artist, photographer, video maker, teacher, which had the opportunity basically to travel everywhere, to see a lot of places, so he might be really an expert in multiculturalism and so forth. So I would say, please. Who wants to break the silence? Maybe Maria, could you explain us which is your, let me say, field of activity in the city of Vienna, and what is your role? So what is your understanding, you know, of the problems with the languages and politics and so forth?
So first of all, let me welcome you all and thank you for the invitation and giving me the opportunity of being part of this today. And of course, the hardest part is to start, right? So I will try to give you a brief overview. In Vienna, I am responsible for the politics of urban design. This means urban development, energy planning, climate protection, and mobility issues and participation issues, which might be maybe the link to today's subject when it comes to my focus, because I think that participation and participatory processes always also mean that we need to have a common language. We have to find a common ground. We have to negotiate a common language, which will allow us to communicate with each other and maybe even achieve a certain result at some point. What may also be interesting is that being of Greek origin and having migrated to Austria 28 years ago, this also means for me switching between languages all the time. This also means for me experiencing what it means to be part of a city which is extremely diverse and speaks many languages. In Vienna we have more than 200 languages that are spoken right now by more than at least 500 people. So this is what I'm talking about. And also, of course, participatory processes in such a city are a big challenge. And last but not least, I'm a linguist by profession, or if you will, by education, which means that I always have to reflect on language and what it is, what type of tool it is, what process it is, what it means, and what it actually can create within society. So the whole subject today is, of course, highly interesting to me as well.
Good. Then I would say, Armin, it's your turn to...
Okay, should be autobiographical.
No.
Well, anyhow, I'm half Italian, half German. In fact, I have also a grandmother from Vienna. So I also kind of grew up in these two language realms, going to a German school in Milano. And so, well, I had this, on one side, this personal experience of language, and maybe to this topic of today, that is quite interesting for me. Maybe, well, my way to work would be more to show you some images, maybe later, and try to see if these images could trigger something in the discussion related to maybe to the topic of the Parliament. There is a project that I did 4 years ago now, 5 maybe, that was for the Maxi Museum in Rome, where I was asked to, basically, the museum wanted to buy some art for the collection, for the museum that still didn't exist. And being the only Italian contemporary state museum that deals with contemporary art, which is strange to think, that you would think out of Austrian condition. My proposal was to take the Italian constitution and make a list of the institutions that are listed in the constitution and see how architecture is used as a language to represent this idea of democracy. And in fact, it took 3 years to get the permission to photograph these places, and it was possible because it was not me asking the permission, but it was the Ministry of Culture asking to the other ministries to get entrance. And in some places it was also very difficult to get entrance as an artist, because that it would be maybe sometimes easier to be there as a reporter, but then you would be able only to see specific spaces and not other, let's say, backstage spaces. And then the explanation was that I was doing an art project And then the idea was, it's about conservation of art. So it was very interesting because the whole process went through a lot of misunderstanding, and maybe this misunderstanding in also what was the role of just depicting images of places that are made in a certain way to depict this moment of encounter, of discussion, created also misunderstanding. Maybe.
I had a question for you, Maria, in the sense that you are part of the Green Party, no? And in a way, if you consider the Green parties, if you consider the sort of problems which gave birth to the Green movement in Europe, you might argue that the Green Party is the truly international contemporary movement, at least inside of the European scene. And I have just a curiosity, how deep are the relations, for example, among the Austrian Green Party, the German one, the Italian one, which is now basically died, and in all the rest of Europe. I mean, how often you share your worries, your goals, your thoughts about European politics?
Now, the Green Party of Europe was actually the first European party to be formed as a European party. This is more than 10 years from now. That we came together in Rome, as a matter of fact, and founded a European party that has party members in all European countries, or at least we're trying to, but most of the time we make it. And as I said, it also has a structure not only as, let's say, an agglomeration of national parties, but it has its own structure also as a European party. Now this means that we're working very closely together, and in terms of finding a common language, I think that within the Green movement, it is one of the most interesting topics to see how people from very, very different parts of Europe come together and try to find a common language in terms of a common program and in terms of common values. Because when you talk about values on a very general level, it's quite easy to find a common ground. But when you put all these values together and look at the overall picture, then you find out that there are big differences, of course, between, let's say, movements on a national level that have a main ecological focus, then movements from the south of Europe that have a very, very strong social, political background and focus, and of course also liberal movements that also exist, and you can find them, for instance, in Switzerland. But not only, in several European countries where you have green parties with a very strong liberal focus. And this is where it gets hot, of course, because you have different, actually very, very different ideas of what the world should look like. And of course, difficult discussions. Anyway, as I said, we are a party already all together. And one last thing, of course you have mainly in the southern countries, green parties that will emerge and will just disappear. The Greek Greens have also disappeared right now. But I think that it has pretty much to do with the situation of the economical crisis in southern Europe, and it makes it very, very difficult for ecological movements to survive and to find a language, to find a common language with people that are right now extremely disorientated. So I believe that they will re-emerge, but they will have tough 10 years from now on.
Silly question. If you discuss all together, do you use English or? Yes.
Mainly.
Mainly. If you produce a European document, do you use English?
If we produce a European document, we always use English, but we also use other languages. It is most of the times also translated in other languages. And of course, what I didn't mention before is that besides the European level, the German-speaking Green parties have very, very close contacts to each other, and mainly on the urban level, because cities right now are networking pretty hard and with each other, not only between now Green parties. The cooperation and the need for coming together, exchanging ideas and solutions, trying to cope with what is actually happening right now worldwide. I mean, if you come to think of it, cities are growing that fast. Vienna, for instance, is growing by 30,000 inhabitants per year. I don't know which Italian city, for instance, has 30,000 inhabitants. But for us, there is a city called Krems, which is near Vienna. So we have to build Krems each year. Now, this is a huge task, and the only way you can actually cope with it is to also come together with other cities and exchange solutions, exchange ideas, and also exchange visions, which I find is most probably the most interesting part. So this also has to do, of course, with language.
I think that the complexity Maria was talking about is very important for progress. If you look at Switzerland, for example, the reason why Switzerland exists in its structure today is that it was not able to do the division of the people in the proper manner that was fit. Because there was the division of religion and there was the division of language. And it was impossible to use either division. It was simply too complex, so they had to decide on something new that was above both of these divisions. At the moment in Switzerland, for example, there is a discussion that the religious division is practically unimportant today. So there is only the language, and the country starts to disintegrate a little bit according to language borders. So they need a very strong idea of the Swiss nation beyond language, beyond nationality, beyond religion. And so I think that the complexity we are facing in Europe at the moment, which really is something one should be optimistic about, but it is really hard for the next 10, 20 years, it is important for progress, really, to accept the complexity and to go beyond. If we look back to the Austrian parliament that we are representing in the next room, you maybe know that in the parliament, in the monarchy, we had a supranational state in some way, or a multinational state. And in the parliament, every representative of the Czech Republic, of the Czech region or of the Hungarian region was allowed to speak in his own language. So people were speaking in their language and not speaking with each other. There was no dialogue, but just a presentation of positions that then had to be in some way coordinated.
And it's even true that if Switzerland is failing as a country, it's disintegrating. Despite almost 30, 40 years of intensive work on bilingual knowledge and so forth, I mean, it was really part of the educational system for quite a while. And despite all the flows of money, which I mean is still a very rich economy, so with basically no problems, no real problem. And despite the fact that it's really bound together by this super specific, alpine environment. So it's quite.
I wouldn't say that Switzerland is disintegrating at the moment, but it's just an indication that they're really thinking ahead.
No.
And checking where are the dangers that can face, that we can have to deal with.
I see what you mean. It's even obviously now when you say the Green Party is mainly talking together, as we are doing now in English, and you obviously if you consider this thing from the point of view of the European Union, you get immediately a huge dilemma. Should you simply push for English, which is not even anymore part of the European panoramas now, or should you push much more on this sort of French plus German plus Italian plus Greek plus whatever, which is obviously a project which might be accomplished in 100 years. I mean, it's a very long-term process, in case.
Well, now I believe that the decision for English is one that has already been taken. many, many years ago. Look around you, look within every European country. You will most probably find out that people who are younger than, let's say, 50, at least can understand and speak English to a certain degree. And if you take a closer look, people who are younger than, let's say, 30, speak English much better anyway. Actually, English, I believe, is the global language of communication. This is the one language where you can travel around the world with, and most of the times, if you have good luck, you will find somebody who might be able to at least speak it, even if in a rudimentary way. I believe that, as I said, actually the world has taken the decision for English, but doesn't want to say it openly. But this does not mean necessarily that for the European Union we would have to stop using our own languages, let's say, when coming together in ritualized situations, like, for instance, the European Parliament. We come together, we have a meeting, we have a conference. Of course everybody can and should be able to speak as well in his own language, but then you need, of course, translation. Now, what is the difference? I think the difference is if I talk to you at a conference and I decide to go for German or for, let's say, Greek, then this means that I feel comfortable. I can talk in a better way. I can express my emotions, of course, much, much, much better in a language that I speak much better, right? And I can convey maybe my ideas to you in a better way. But what happens then is that it is translated, and by translation you already lose about 30% of all that I meant and all that I felt and all that I wanted to tell you. This is it, you know, it's the law of translation. If it's a good translator, you lose about 20%, and if it's not such a good translation, which is very often the case, you might even lose up to 40%. When we come together and we decide to go for English, of course I'm not able to convey my emotions and my thoughts in the same way as I would be able to do it in German or in Greek. But then you have a chance to get to know me better. And yet you have the chance to talk to me directly and not via a voice that comes from a little room up there. So this is why I mean that you need both. And I think also that Europe can cope with both. And anyway, the future of Europe should be that everybody is able to speak his own language in a perfect way, because we have semi-linguism problems all over Europe as well. So let's start with the main idea. Everybody should be able to speak their mother language in a proper manner. Then they should be able to speak English, I believe, and then they should be able to speak another one or two European languages, or world languages, whatever they choose to speak, let's say, until they finish school. This is something, for instance, that Finland is practicing with great success within schooling system, or Greece is practicing outside the schooling system when parents have the money to pay for it, because if you only speak Greek, you're not getting that far, right? So this is why Greeks will go for foreign languages. Anyway, what I mean is that my vision of a Europe is a Europe where we can communicate in more than one language with each other, if we choose to, but then we still have one common ground, which is English, where we should all be able to find each other. At least this one language is the one which is spoken by most Europeans.
Absolutely convinced by you. No, it's not easy though. It's not easy. I mean, it's a very long process, and it's a process in which we should invest a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of, yeah. So I would say maybe we leave words for a while and we just look at your research.
Well, I have now this computer here. You're far away.
Thank you.
We try to make this experiment because it's not very. I will show you some of the images out of this project. Just a second. I don't know if you something, maybe more intuition. So I have to think on the contrary. Okay, here. So this is the elevator to the Quirinale. So it's the elevator of the Italian president in the Quirinale. And this is on the left, on the right side, in fact, of President Napoletano. So it's the, you see the Queen, you see the Carabinieri, you see the Pope. And on the left side, you see this Quarto Stato kind of painting. So see really kind of division already in how the room is used. And this is a picture that I should not show, for example. It was not authorized for publication. It's the bathroom of the guests of the president. So in a certain way, when I like very much this kind of decoration, but this is not allowed in a certain way in, I can say, the language of press and representation, because it's a place that should not be depicted. So this is the room of ceramics and argenteria. So in a certain way, it's these are also mostly also presents to the president, or objects that come from the history of this place that is quite unique in the world, because it begins as a religious place because it's the palace of the Pope. Then it's transformed into the place of the king. So it's not the democratic moment, but it's the transformation from the religious state to the civil state. And then after the second, well, then it's the Ministry of Exterior during the fascist regime, and then transformed into the democratic representation, okay, sorry, of space. This is the young Italy on top of the Senate. A picture done during the, oh, now it's going, sorry, out of control. Can you see the picture a little bit, or? Okay. This is, sorry, I have to, it's going on go back a little bit. Okay, this is interesting because it's inside the Banca d'Italia, and what you see, in fact, is a translating booth. And this is the Asian room, and on the side there was a convention with about economy. And so you have this kind of decoration, that is the decoration of representation, and inside you have this kind of alien that is the translation booth. So it is also very interesting, I think, in Luxembourg there is an office with about 400 translators that work for the European Union, and basically each law that is well, produced in Europe has to be translated in all these languages. And there is well, I was speaking with a friend, Vincenzo Latronico, that is an Italian writer, and his mother is working in this office, and we asked if it would be possible to photograph it, as I was really interested in this idea, but we didn't get permission. Yeah.
This is a building by Dominique Perrault with two towers, two separate towers, and I think always two levels are one language. And I was really fascinated by this construction, because if I got commissioned to design the translation offices for Europe, I would make some mesh structure and some structure where people could get into contact with each other. And it's really strange that the European Union houses these languages in separate towers on separate levels and not even lets people do photographs in there.
Maybe one interesting thing is also this idea of strange visual connection, because the conference is in this room. That is, we don't see it. It's not in the picture. It's out of the film cut. But well, in fact, this is the room. Sorry, with the convention. And sorry, I always click on the. And what is interesting that the translator look into these monitors and see who is speaking. So when they translate, somehow they need to have also this visual contact, but they were not allowed to be in this room because it's a historical room that is constructed before this idea of technology. and also in a period where maybe this kind of international system was not yet developed. But so there is always this problem of this architecture that is an architecture that is historical, so represents the nation idea, but now is used in a context where the nation boundaries are not anymore sufficient, where decisions has to be taken on a larger level, and also where the only way that this translation is possible is through technology, through transmission of information through technology, because it's not anymore that we go to the parliament to hear what our politicians say, but we look into Twitter, but simply before we were looking into television. And so all this architecture that is a kind of oral and physical architecture has to be transformed into this digital. This digital infrastructure is then put inside. There is always kind of surgical work that is inserted without disturbing the historical part. And you see in a lot of this architecture that there is a lot of effort in this surgical work. I don't know if I can show you well. Maybe I draft later.
No, I mean, I think you are in a way touching sort of interesting ground, because, for example, and I think it's more a question which is coming from architects, which we might ask both of you. Do you think that architecture might still be able to represent, embody, or even enforce values which might be shared or might be imposed? But I mean, is it still possible, this role for physical architecture, to simply represent, obviously without a linguistic barrier, no? Hopefully without it, shared values, shared interests?
I think he has to start now, not
Yeah.
Well, I think that basically architecture, this kind of political architecture, first of all, has the role to embed an ideology, and then different kind of strategies are used to represent this. And also, when we went through these different buildings in Rome, of course, you have different kind of epochs. So you have this moment of the Risorgimento, where the buildings are kind of opera-like. They look post-Verdi, and always, of course, the reference to Greece and the Romans. Here, this is the Italian Senate. I'm sorry, I'm showing it to the public, but you don't see so. Or this is the reading room, and so you have this depiction of the Roman Senate as a background, as an opera background, almost like a painting. But then you need always to have the television again, because if not, when they read the newspaper, they don't see what the colleagues are doing. So you have this mediatic moment, and this is the old transmission of information is the post office of the Senate, and parallelly you have the television direction. So this is in fact where now or another kind of information is transmitted. Or here the journalists that wait for the interview. This is the Constitution, and this is again the TV room. Or this is the Corte Costituzionale, the Constitutional Court. And in the back there is a room where the courts kind of comes together to take the decision. And this room is in fact never depicted, and I was not allowed to depict it. And in fact it's the highest level of decision in the state, because the Constitutional Court can reject also the law of the parliament. And in fact it shows its power by not allowing to depict the place where the decisions are taken. So let's say the ultimate power is the power of God, not to be depicted, the religious moment. Maybe I'm shifting away from the topic. Or this is also the Palazzo di Giustizia, that is, or Palazzaccio, that in fact is another interesting place because Orson Welles used it also as a set for the Kafka's filming of Il Processo, of the process. So you have a strange moment where reality and fiction come together. But the question was how...
I mean, if it is still thinkable for contemporary architecture to try to convey, to try to embody a sort of shared value on a political level. I'm asking it because if I think, for example, at the set of buildings which represent, for example, European Union, yeah, I would argue, no, it's not possible anymore. I mean, they are so bland, so generic, so ugly, that that in most of the cases I would say, no, it's no more possible for architecture to have this role. But
maybe I say something. Maybe it's also the question is how is politics done now, and maybe the question is also, is a municipality, for example, maybe can take more immediate and more important decisions than a parliament, and who is also, the question is, who is also doing politics, and on which level do we want to begin to speak about representation, and because now I show these huge, let's say, national systems, but I think there is a very interesting idea of other parliaments also, like here now we are in a space and discussing.
Well, to be honest, I think if you take a look around, this is a very good room to talk about this. Because the way all these parliaments are presented, you actually realize immediately that this is a language, right? It's almost like an alphabet, in a sense. And I think that, of course, architecture is always a language. It always means representation. It always means, it is not only a language, let's say, in terms of what is it represented and what was it meant to be. It also tells a story down to how it was constructed, an object. Not only when it was constructed, not only why it was constructed, for what purposes and what means, but also how it was constructed, right? From slavery up to the way we construct buildings today. So it always tells a story, this is what I'm trying to say. And it always also conveys values. But if you now take a closer look at all these parliaments, then you can actually see that they were built in a specific way because somebody wanted to convey a message, a specific message, right? And if you take a closer look at the European buildings on the European level, I agree with you, let's say on them being ugly, if we're supposed to use such a terminus. But I think that what they also show, what they also convey is that they weren't built in order to convey anything. So, what I'm trying to say right now is that you can always convey values with architecture, but then you have to know which they were, and you have to want to convey them. So maybe the architecture on the European level just shows, in a sense, that in the European level we still lack maybe the vision of what is Europe in terms of a political project, in terms of society, and in terms of common values that you would all be able to answer if I asked you now, what are the European values? Let me pose another question. What is actually the common European political project, and what is the, let's say, the European identity that we all have? If we start thinking about it, I think that everybody and every one of you would be able to tell a story. We would all have a narrative about Europe, but I believe deeply that it would be the same narrative that we all have. Because Europe has not been working on this narrative. And it might also be that many of its political problems that it has right now, the separatist movements and everything, has pretty much also to do with not working on this common narrative and not working on this common vision, not working on this common political ground where we can find each other and we can all tell this narrative, although we're from different countries and although we're most probably also from different political, let's say, well, directions. We come from different political directions. So what I'm trying to say is that architecture always can represent and can convey values, but you have to know what the project is about, and you have to want it, and you have to plan it straight ahead in order to do so. And many parliaments here were planned this way in order to convey something on an abstract level.
I think architecture always conveys values, even if it's not intended. At the moment, the only iconic building of the European Union is the Pavilion building, which was built in the 1960s, an X-shaped, huge building, which was built for administration purposes. And it conveys the idea of administration. This is the building where the Commission today is housed. But there is certainly no idea of Europe represented in this building beyond administration and organization. And if you compare this with the United States and with the buildings in Washington, the capital, then there is a language that was used. It was the language of classicism, and the language of classicism was the language of the Enlightenment, which was a very young development at that moment, maybe 30, 40 years by. And if we look at all the parliaments in this room, many of them take up this idea of classicism, sometimes just for copycat ideas. We want to have something like another country, but I would still say that there is an afterglow of the Enlightenment visible in these shapes. And still, if we think of something supranational today, of the idea of a supranational organization like the European Union, there certainly would be needed a new approach to find some language for this new construction. And the EC had some chances to do this 10 years ago in 2004, after the Constitution was the European Constitution was almost accepted. There were big endeavors to build new buildings with large competitions, which mainly were failures. So what is now being built in Brussels, there is a new Europe building for the head of the Commission and the foreign representative of the EU, and it is really a big failure. It will be finished next year, and it is more or less a joke compared to the idea of the European Union as an institution. So my fear is that after these failures, many politicians will fall back to the administration level and say we do not invest in architecture, in heavy, complex structures. The image of Europe, the image of the supranational institution will have to be found somewhere else, in the digital realm, in visual commitments and definitions. So this will be a very interesting development for architecture if it still can claim that due to its heaviness, to the slow development of any architectural project, it has more importance, more right to represent something than faster media, hotter media that we're confronted with today.
I completely agree with both of you, and to me, for example, is the extent to which we are not able to imagine a visual identity for Europe is, for example, perfectly exemplified by the monuments on our currency. Just this, okay, it's almost a joke. It's unbelievable that we had to invent fake monuments because we weren't able to simply get a deal among us, and choose 1 million from France and 1 million from Austria and so forth. So it's really true. Basically, on that level, Europe has nothing to say. And obviously there, I mean, for example, if you look now at countries like Macedonia, and the way in which they are using architecture in order to reimagine, invent, or probably even enforce an identity, which is almost completely fake. I mean, it's just an invention, in that case, simply coming from the top. It's not a democratic decision. And so, I mean, they are really stressing this sort of Alexander, mythical figure, and building up huge statues and arches and whatever sort of building which relates to that. So I would say, I'm not saying that we should embrace this sort of operation, so like saying we jump into a language, we decided, few people, and then we simply adopt it. But it's true that it's part, it's an important, a fundamental part, I think, of trying to imagine a shared identity. And I believe that you have to invest at that level in architecture because, because of its permanence, basically. Because
you can turn off.
Yeah, you cannot change after 1 year, which is a great domination of architecture, but at the same time it's magical power, potential.
I just sit here and wait for the question. It won't come. So I will just try to share a few thoughts that I have right now. What I'm trying to work out all the time is that if you look at the European project, then you can see that let's do it another way. If you compare it with national states. Now, what we know about national states is that in most cases, people will have a narrative about the state and about society and some kind of identity narrative, which cannot be imposed. It cannot be imposed by any leader. It has emerged over centuries, but in a sense, of course, this is one of the hottest issues in politics, if you can take influence on this narrative, and if so, how. But this is another discussion. Anyway, you have it, and you need it also, because on the basis of this narrative, you have the notion of belonging together. And the notion of belonging together means that each and every one of us will be most hopefully open to the idea of redistributing wealth, right? Because if you have a state, then a state also means solidarity in most cases. And it means, once again, that you are open to the idea of paying your taxes, so wealth can be, and prosperity can be redistributed among regions within this country and among, well, people, right? Now, if you come to the European level, you find out that there is no such narrative. This is what I'm trying to say. Well, yes, there is, it's so tiny right now, and this is what I'm trying to say all the time, that we have to work on this, and we have to see to it that we don't work on this only on the political level, but we see to it that we have it, maybe some years from now, in the hearts of people and in the minds of people, as a common vision, and as a common idea of belonging together, and thus helping each other when we need it, and thus also redistributing wealth and resources within this huge space, political space, this huge common society, which is the European society. Now, all this, I believe, leads once again to architecture, because of course architecture is also one of many means of communicating such values and such ideas, but up to now, mainly on the national level. Still, what I find out is that people from all over Europe start sort of adopting architecture from other European countries as their own as well. When I'm in Italy, I sort of feel proud of what I see around, and I sort of grasp the meanings, the values that are conveyed, also as something that corresponds to me as well, because I'm European, and because I'm part of something larger. So I don't know if you can understand me, because it's a little bit difficult to express such thoughts on this level, but I think that once again, maybe architecture and maybe the way we look at architecture coming from different countries across Europe is the way we can start also creating a common identity. It doesn't mean necessarily that you need new buildings in Brussels or somewhere else within Europe. It means that you start realizing that all that is built around you all over Europe is actually you're part of it.
This is a very optimistic view of things, and I just want to point out that in the other room behind there we show the largest building we show in this presentation is a conference center in China that was built for the World Economic Forum Davos, and it's a huge structure where you could fit in the Viennese parliament easily twice. Yeah? It has an enormous size. It was built for 2 days every 2 years, World Economic Forum, Asia. And it's a meeting point of something that Samuel Huntington called the Davos man, a person who is not committed to a nation, not committed to Europe, a supranational institution, but to some global idea of a global liberated economy. And so there is a tension here, and obviously that these systems also try to express themselves in architecture. Size matters, obviously. I have been in this building and it really amazes you by its sheer size. It's 40 meters high halls inside, 15 meters above ground. So there is certainly a tension here that we wanted to point out also, that maybe even being European is still not enough. This is the next shell we're talking about. And if we're not going one step beyond in addition, not let's forget about Europe and talk about the globe, this is nonsense. But it's an idea of several shells living above each other, and probably the global shell has to be always taken into account too.
Maybe I can show some more images, but from another project that we opened on the 16th of October in Berlin at HKW, Haus der Kulturen der Welt. It's called Anthropocene Observatory. It's a project together with John Palmesino, and Sophie Ronstock and Anselm Franke. So basically 2 architects and a curator. And well, in fact, it's a project financed by the German Parliament. Maybe this is also kind of reshaping a specific, or to show that there is a certain attention to specific topics. And it starts from the proposal of Paul Kruse, that is a chemist that won the Nobel Prize because he discovered the ozone hole. And he proposed that we are not anymore in the geological epoch of the Holocene, but we are in the Anthropocene. So basically that the man is the main say, geological force, and not anymore the Earth itself. And what we were doing in the last 2 years were going into, to look at places and institutions that discuss or produce information regarding the climate change, to understand how basically the whole works, the whole system works, because there are a group of scientists that collect information. It is mostly regulated by the IPCC, that is based in Geneva. So I'm bringing up this discussion that there is not only, let's say, the discussion on in the municipality, in the local level. There is not only the one in the national level or the regional level, but there are, and not even Europe, but on other levels. And then the discussion is also, for example, in this case, how does the information get transmitted from the scientist to the politician, that then again have to convince the, let's say, the larger public to make changements on this topic of climate change. And well, what is again interesting, for example, that the ex-German parliament was kind of recycled in Bonn, and is now the place where the UNFCCC is preparing basically all these climate meetings. So again, the German government kind of reshapes himself by having the parliament a symbolic place that is now the place of discussions about ecology. I don't know, I can show you some images or in some text. I just now, in fact, again, it's a work that is in progress, it's not the final edit. And anyhow, you will see it very small. This will be 2 projections each, well, a projection of 8 meters. And you will see now 8 centimeters, but let me see if it works. I don't know really.
What now?
We are in Geneva, World Meteorological Association. And again, this is the translating room. Because again, here the problem is language, and again, English is the main language. Climate discussions. Also because it's a language of science in a certain way. What you see in the back is a decoration of 4 seasons. So there is a tank moving. And the whole project was really, again, like really observing and trying to understand how this institution works and how the information gets transmitted. Basically, these meetings of IPCC work a little bit like this. There are about 800 scientists that are, let's say, elected or commissioned by the different nations that do the research on different topics, not only on climate change, but all the consequences of climate change. And each of them is specialized in a specific topic and creates a document. These documents are brought together in a book. And then other scientists or the general public is invited to put questions. The scientists have to answer these questions. And then this is brought together in a final document that is signed by each delegate of each nation. That is a scientific delegate. So that when the discussion arrives, the discussion is on this document that was really read by the representative of each nation line by line. So that then the political discussion cannot say, okay, that I don't believe in this science. Because then the discussion said, well, you have to believe because the delegate of the nation already signed that you think that this science is correct. And of course, this process takes about 3-4 years every time. And on one side you can say, well, it's the biggest effort that humanity ever did to conceive information, scientific information, then to take political political decisions. On the other side, it's so gigantic that it can only fail because it's so slow. And in a certain way, this is also again, how do you set up a system where this kind of discussion and information can circulate? Okay, here, for example, we are again now in the German parliament, and here this is the next step. In a certain way, this scientific information comes to the politicians that then try to interpret this, and then of course the problem is how are these decisions that are decisions that have consequences for the next 20-30 years go into politics when let's say the election and reaction time of politics is about 4 to 5 years, and mainly this is one of the main problems. But also generally, and then one of the questions is also a lot of science that is, well, this is something that I begin now to understand within specific places, is that a lot of this, let's say, climate science comes also from a position that is quite interesting because, for example, it was Margaret Thatcher that developed the first climate research institute in Europe. And in a certain way, with the end of the Cold War, all the computer and cybernetic technology that was kind of developed to calculate the atomic bomb, but also the...
If you look at the evolution of mankind,
This is Mrs. Figueras,
mankind
so
started making decisions within the family unit. And then we moved to a little tribal unit to make decisions. And then we moved eventually to the nation state. And we kind of got stuck at the nation state. Now, because we're living in the Anthropocene era, because of that, now the problems that are here today and the problems that will come tomorrow.
Anyhow, maybe I just close this sentence, and that a lot of this, let's say, know-how that was used during the Cold War then had to be somehow, all these investments had to be reinvented, all this modeling that was used, for example, to think about the nuclear fallout, all this knowledge was then brought in after the Cold War in climate research. And so there is a kind of double side of all this work that is behind climate change.
I think it's very interesting what you are saying about the time span, no? And I even think it's related to this issue of the language, because it is true, when you think that politics are usually tuned, on a 4 to 5 years, but not even, because it's 2 years and then the elections, basically, or the pre-election time. Okay, I wouldn't say that to an exponent, a member of the Green Party, maybe, but I mean, in most of the cases, that is really the time span of politics, and on the other end, the time span of either architecture or language making or identity making, whatever, it's much bigger, much longer. I mean, we are talking about you do a building from the very first steps to the final realization and to its life. Possibly it's like